Hi, I'm Phil Swantek. I'll be teaching the class on cameras today, and I know we only have 30 minutes, so I'll try to fit in as much as I can. Obviously, I teach a 16-week course at Lawrence Tech, so that's 45 hours of teaching. So this is going to be obviously consolidated, and I know there's some time. We want to leave time at the end for Q&A. What I do is teach theory and practice. So most of my time today will be spent going over some visuals and things like that. It won't be how to use a camera. Each camera does the same thing, but there are different intricacies to every type that you have. But there's more of a big picture, pun intended, of using cameras and how to frame for proper shots and what those shots, how they affect the audience. And then long lens, short lens, wide angle lens, whatever you're using, how that affects the frame as well and the perception. Because what we're doing is telling stories. So using the camera to tell stories, you have different techniques that you can use to emphasize different things, because as the camera person, you are in control of directing the person's eye where you want it to go. Okay. The first thing I'll say is I mentioned before, I teach at Lawrence Tech. I've been in this business for about 35 years now. I started at a TV station in Traverse City, so I was writing and producing commercials, short form, so I was living my life in 30-second increments for the most part. So that was fun for a while, and after that I thought, well, I'd rather do something different. So I got into more long-form television shows. I went to Dallas and worked for a gentleman down there who was really great at what he did, and so I learned quite a bit. We traveled to overseas, Israel. It was a Christian television program, so we would do a ton of interviews, but we'd also do dramatic setups and things like that. So I learned a whole bunch from him and doing that. When I came back, I went to work for a studio here in town at the time, and we were doing business television for Daimler Chrysler. So then shooting and a lot of editing, writing and producing. So all of those areas, I've never shot a motion picture, so that's one of those things that I've not done. Probably would be no good at it because I've just not done it, but I've done a ton of documentaries, short form, promos, things like that. Have worked for a lot of Fortune 500 companies when I was working with More Crim Communications, now called Crimson, which was an ad agency, or is an ad agency. So that allowed me to hone my skills in different areas, and pretty much most areas of broadcast television. So it's one of those things that you can never stop learning. You know, if you go online and you start Googling and go to YouTube, and you'll just continually learn as I continually learn. So with that said, I'm gonna move along. Oh, and I wanted to mention one of the things that we've done. I've worked for Carrie here is the Pink Fund, which was a series of interviews with women who have been helped financially by the Pink Fund. It's a great organization. So we did interviews with them. They sent us images to incorporate, pretty straightforward, in-studio interviews, and then adding those images and working to be heartfelt and also to educate. You know, I think when you do a production, you should look to educate the person, to inform the person, and hopefully you're inspiring them to do something as well. So when I come away from a program or a project, whoever I'm working with, I want to hit 3 or 4 of those things. Okay, I want to inform and educate and entertain. You've got to entertain. If you're not entertaining, there's so much other places for them to turn that if you're not entertaining them at least a little bit here and there, they're going to say, oh, this is boring, I'm moving on. Okay? First thing that I do, and you should do if you're doing more location than studio, although studio it's important too, is what's the first thing you do when you walk in with your camera? Any idea?
Look for the good light.
You can adjust light and to your preferences, but the first thing is you do is where are you going to put the camera? Where are you going to show this scene from? So if I'm shooting this scene, of me up here, I'm going to have a camera back there somewhere shooting this way. Then I'd want to come around and get reaction shots as well. What's the second thing that I'm going to do once I have that location set up with my camera?
Framing it?
Exactly. What's my focal length? Am I going to be zoomed all the way out and show this person up here plus the monitors? Am I going to establish the whole scene? Am I going to start on a close-up? How am I going to do that? So those are the two critical things that you do, especially if you're doing location stuff. You walk into this, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And especially if you've never done a site survey. Here I am, I'm going to set up, I'm on a camera here, I want to show these three people, whatever. So you do those things. That's the focal length, okay? All cameras, I shouldn't say that, most cameras have zoom lenses. A lot of them also have a prime lens, and I'll talk just briefly about the difference. A zoom lens allows you to take and change your focal length. And focal length is really the center of the lens to where it falls onto the sensor, and there's usually a little white line, it really doesn't matter, on the outside to say, where is this chip? This 35 millimeter or 22 millimeter chip that's in there. So as I zoom in, so it lengthens my lens, if you will. It's a telephoto lens. And if this were a prime lens that only had one focal length, it would be a very, very long lens. It would stick out. And if you've watched sporting events and they cut and you see somebody on the sidelines, they've got this huge lens. It's a 200, 300 millimeter. That way they can draw, they can get people that are far, far away, football players, whatever, right up close. Okay, so as I zoom out, though, now I'm on a wide angle lens, okay? And so what you're doing is when you're creating a video, you are taking a series of shots and putting them together to tell a story. Why do you need a series of shots? What do you think? You watch the news tonight, you watch a motion picture tonight, you watch a sitcom. Is it all shot on one angle? Exactly. You keep it interesting, and you show the viewer different angles of the scene. Okay? If in the old days when motion pictures were first started, Milieu, I think was his name, he had a camera. He just sat there like he was in the audience. The camera just sat there, and the play played out in front of him. Back then it was fascinating because you think, wow, this is really incredible what's going on here. And then they started to learn, oh, we need a close-up here. We need to focus on who on stage do we want to see. Same thing in a motion picture. Who in this scene do we want to see? So you go from a wide shot to a medium, to a close-up, maybe an extreme close-up, okay? So I want to talk about those types of shots so you have in your mind exactly what types of shots are available to you and why you would use them, okay? So here's my wide shot. I think that's max. So what does a wide shot do? What does it tell you? Why would I use a wide shot?
Place,
Tells me the place.
time of the day.
So it could tell you the time of day. So I look at, this is my wide shot. This is telling me I'm in a studio. I see a green screen. I see a tripod back there, things like that. What else does it tell me?
The overall picture or the big picture?
Yeah, it's the big picture. And again, this isn't a great wide shot because I'm limited by this lens.
It gives you
establish
context that there's an audience.
Yes, exactly. It not only shows me the location, but who's here and where these people are in relationship to one another. So then when I start going from this to close-ups, the people go, oh, I understand. We're getting shots, close-ups of people in the audience, okay? Now, let's pretend that none of you are here. Now I would have to leave. This is our talent, and he's just in a field of soybeans or whatever. He's standing out in the woods or the park, something like that. So you have different focal lengths that you use. And what I'm gonna do here, I don't know if he wants me to sit down. I'm gonna go really quickly through, we're only 12 minutes in. The types of shots. Here's an example of a wide shot or extreme long shot. The emphasis is not on the talent, but it's on the what?
Location.
It's on the location. So we know, and does this location set a mood as you see it?
Yep.
How do you feel? Huh? Cold? Yeah, overcast, two people, almost looks kind of lonely. So let's get rid of that one. That's an extreme long shot. So when the director says, hey, I need you to give me an extreme long shot, that's what you fire out for him. Okay, so here's extreme wide or extreme long. They can be used interchangeably. This is obviously, I mean, if you've seen any of the movies, you'll know what this is from. Does anybody know?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, yes. So here's an extreme wide shot. We see our character, but more than that, we see the surroundings that he's in. So if I were going to get an extreme wide shot of this building from outside, I wouldn't stand in the parking lot. I would have to cross the street, unless I had a real wide angle lens, but I'd cross the street, and then I would get my extreme wide shot. Okay. So, sorry, we just did that one. Okay, so Hitchcock, another idea of an extreme or wide shot. Again, you see this and you go, what's going on here? Almost like a standoff. But where are they? In the middle of nowhere. And with this line in the road separating the two of them. Okay, so he knows what he's doing here. He's setting up this shot. There's going to be some kind of a confrontation, we think. Okay. All right, I'm going to jump ahead there because I know this time is going to fly by. So those are examples of extreme wide shot, and here's a wide shot, also called, a long shot. I can stretch this out a little bit more, I think. What's that? Yes, my student yesterday highly recommended it because we were talking about wide shots and long shots. So again, we see the character, but we also see the vista. We see the location that he's in. So more important than the character is the surroundings. Okay. Now here's a full shot. And notice the difference. One is a long shot, wide shot. This is called a full shot. Oh yeah, sorry. With a full shot, who takes preeminence in the scene?
Subject.
The subject. But what do you still see around the subject?
Background.
The environment that subject is in. So be thinking about that. If you have a full shot you want to take of somebody, this is a great way to fill the screen head to toe, and yet you still get to see the background that surrounds them. Okay. Now we're going to start moving in from there. There's four really types of shots here, 4 or 5. So this is, sorry, let me grab. This is called a cowboy shot. Anybody know why? The framing on the bottom tells you why it's called a cowboy shot. They framed it, Westerns, loose enough to show what? His gun. Okay, so that's why they call that a cowboy shot, and the name is still used to this day. Now we're going to come in a little bit closer. Here's our medium shot, medium long shot. And again, a lot of these, in the business, if you were in a motion picture set, the director might have a little bit of nuance onto exactly what he's calling it, but his DP, director of photography, would know what's going on or what he's looking for. So here's our medium long shot. So you're now getting more emotion, right, from the person in the shot. And what are you losing now? Background is softened. Okay, that's this idea of depth of field. And once you start to introduce narrow depths of field, the eye, you're directing that person's eye right where you want it to go. Because these people are never going to be hunting, are those trees in the background, are those lights, whatever. They're stuck right here on this face, the pretty dress, the bubbles, things like that. Okay? Okay, same thing here, medium shot, looking, and what comes along with that medium shot is what? Emotion, okay? The long shot, the wide shot, you didn't get emotion from the character. Now you're getting emotion from the character. Let's go to a medium close-up. Okay, so now here again, the amount of emotion with that shot is tremendous. And what about your background? Is it busy, bothersome, distracting? No, because you've got what? A narrow
Focus.
depth of field, okay? You'll go home and it'll be a blessing and a curse. You'll start watching shows now with a completely different feel of, oh, that's a close-up, that's a medium shot. Oh, what's the background? Again, same thing here, close-up. That person's subject's head face is filling the screen. Now you know the director, when they're doing like that, and you're your own director, is saying, I want the person to feel what I'm trying to show them. Okay, I want my viewer to get a feel for this. Okay, here's a close-up again. This is also called a choker, but this is extreme close-up, not quite an extreme close-up, a close-up choker. So you see you're framing from the bottom of the chin to the forehead. Well, what about seeing the forehead and the chin? The brain doesn't need to see it. It sees everything it needs to. However, when you're shooting this, never put the chin on the bottom of the frame. It'll look strange. Okay, the framing on this, you just cut across the chin and above the eyebrows. All right, now, so an extreme close-up, what do you think is going to pop up when I hit extreme close-up? Very good. So here's my extreme close-up. You talk about right in there, extreme close-up. Normally it's the eyes. I mean, depending on what you're doing, I mean, it could be an ear, a toe, a finger, a ring on a finger, whatever you have. Clint Eastwood, again, another extreme close-up, okay? So these are the types of shots that have been used for 100 years. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, okay? If you're creating a story, or if you're in studio, you know, if we're in studio, Steve's directing the shot, he's coming up on a wide shot, and he said, okay, give me a medium shot, give me a close-up. They're starting to talk about something really heartening or intense. They're going to do that, okay? A couple other things. How are we doing for time? Oh, 7 minutes. I'm going to go real quick. Also now the placement of the camera. This is called a God's eye or a bird's eye view. This allows you to see the surroundings. So if I'm shooting, I was telling my students last night, if I'm shooting, say, something Greek Week at LTU, and I'm down low, and I can see people, and I can see people behind them, and maybe some, but I don't know how large this crowd is. If I get that camera up on a jib or high up on a tripod or in a van or something, I now have this bird's eye or God's eye view. I say, oh, that goes back for, 30, 40, 50 feet. There's a lot of people in there, okay? When you shoot your interviews, always shoot them eye level, because that's how we're used to talking with people. I'm a little bit higher, but you're not going to be sitting there talking with a friend, one seated and one standing. We like to see eye level, okay? Don't make that mistake. But now, for psychological purposes, what does this say when you look at this kid? How do you feel about her? That she's weak, vulnerable, frightened. Here she's grabbing the leg. That doesn't hurt either. But that camera is at a high angle. Okay? So if you want to show someone, this is different from the bird's eye view. If you want to show someone who is maybe frightened or weak or diminutive, you put them at, the camera would be a high angle. And the opposite of that, let's see what this one is. Okay, same thing, little kid. What's the opposite of a high angle?
Low.
Okay, so what do you think the feeling is going to be for the viewer? What will that talent or that actor or that subject emote?
Power.
Power, exactly. So this is an example of that. It's a powerful shot. If he turned around, I think he'd look more powerful, but these buildings are impressive. Here, I think, is a better example. Okay, you talk about power, there's power. And it's no coincidence that he shot at a low angle, okay? So remember that. If you want something shot, if you want somebody to look bigger than life, you go to that. If you're doing interviews, this over the shoulder is a way to draw the viewer into the conversation and also to draw the two people close to each other in the conversation. In Hollywood, or you'd call this shot dirty, because the shoulder's there and the person's chin is there. Sometimes you might shoot it clean because it might help you in post-production, that if it's clean and if this person happens to be moving or his lips are moving, you can't cut to that shot while this person, and you'll see, wow, why are his lips moving? Well, because you shot it out of sequence or whatever reason. But there's an over the shoulder. All right, and the time that I have remaining, let's talk about the focal lengths that you have. What does this lens, I think, goes from a 8mm or 12mm, something wide, to a 70 or an 80mm, a very long lens, a telephoto. Okay, so it zooms in. Let's see what focal length does as far as distorting. So here's a picture of a woman. It's the same woman, but it's shot with different focal lengths. So this is a 350mm lens. So if that lens were on here, that's a really long lens. And what it has the potential to do is it flattens the person's face. Here on this, it's flattening. Let's go to the opposite end. This is a 24mm wide-angle lens. It's almost like this is a different person because of the distortion and the rounding and the distorting of the face that's happening here. So what you'll learn is that when you're doing interviews, it's best to be around 70, 135mm there, because then that lens returns an image that is very, very similar to how our eyes see people, because every lens is going to distort a little bit. And if you get too long of a lens, all of a sudden, see how her face is narrow here. Now her face is getting too wide, and it's getting flattened out, okay? One image I have here, yeah, so here is getting rid of all those in between. Here's a 24mm and a 70mm. This is not how this person looks in real life. So you don't want to shoot, and I've seen this before too, people running around the office, hey, let's get some headshots for our website, and they grab their phone and they shoot with a 24mm lens, and the person's like, oh, that didn't come out so well, did it? Okay? So when you're using your iPhone, zoom in on it a little bit. They all do it, okay? So that way you see that. And there's one other thing, how the focal length will also distort the background. Here it's doing both. Here's a 12mm. These aren't clown glasses up here. Those are his glasses, okay? And but look at the background. Look what the wide angle does. So you have a police car here that's looks like it's pretty stretched, looks pretty strange. And there's buildings back here. All right. So now we go to 35. How many cars do we see behind him here? One. Here we see, oh wait, there's 3 or 4 cars down there. Okay. And here at 105, well, we should be going down, 18mm, sorry, 24mm. Now we start to reveal more of that background around him. Now, though, we get into 35, and his face is coming into where the proportions should be. But now what's happening? Here on a wide angle, you've got a narrow depth of field or a very deep depth of field. Here, here, and here. Can you see well into the background? Yes? So you've got, you watch Citizen Kane, a great motion picture. He used a lot of wide-angle lenses, so his depth of field is very large, deep focus, so you can see people in the background, what they're doing as well. My aside, sorry. So here now we're getting into a longer lens, and what's it doing? It's doing 2 things to your background. Can you see what's happening here, and here, and here? All of a sudden, you're starting to lose focus. But all these buildings that are so far away are now drawn up close to him, okay? All of a sudden, these buildings are almost like right behind him. So if I'm shooting a shot and I've got somebody here, and maybe there's a barrier or something that I can't show what's in the background very well. Maybe it's a school building and you want to see the logo, or maybe it's an automobile, whatever. What do I have to do? I want to pull that background up towards that person. Well, I zoom in and shoot longer lens. Of course, when I shoot that longer lens, all of a sudden, he goes from a medium shot to an extreme close-up. So what do I have to do? There's only one thing I can do. I've zoomed in, and now he goes from a medium shot to like this. What do I have to move? I have to move the camera 20, 30, it might be 40 feet all the back to get the identical framing, but it's now allowed me to bring the background right behind that person. Okay? Again, another technique, a trick that you can use as you're producing things and saying, geez, it looked really great with my vision here, but on camera, it didn't work. Okay? So I wish I had more time.
A few more minutes.
Okay.
I'd like some samples of lenses up there if you want to show.
Oh, okay. The other thing is this idea of vision. Okay, so we have all these different lenses, whether it's an 18 millimeter, which is a wide fisheye almost, to a 35, a 50, an 80, and then which is a longer lens, and it gets you closer to that person, more focused. What millimeter lens do you have? Is it a 90? 180? What do you got? What God give you?
Oh,
No. 50?
180.
I can see 180. Okay? But do we really go through life as though we have a 180 on? No. Because as we speak, I'm looking over here, or over here to view different people. It's called foveal vision. So they realize it's about a 40 millimeter, 45, 50 millimeter lens is what you have on. Okay? And so if you go into a setting and go, and I used to do this until I got behind the camera and looked at it through that lens and say, oh yeah, this will work. And I set up the camera, I go, no, this isn't working. Because I was looking through mine and not through the cameras. Okay? So foveal vision, that's why when you shoot at about a 45 or 50 millimeter, that's very similar to what people are used to seeing. Now, if you shoot maybe a 18 or a 20, whatever those lenses are, there's a bunch of different ones, then it becomes different from what we see, and that adds to the more cinematic feel as well. Okay? And some directors will use one lens and shoot their entire movie with just one lens, moving back and forth however they want to do it. Okay? So that's a thing to keep in consideration when you walk into your scene and your setting. What are you looking at through? And some people you'll see go like this and say, oh, okay, now I know who's going to be on camera with my 50 millimeter lens, something like that. Okay? So this is, what is this one? Is this like a, oh, so this goes from a 70 to a 200, okay? So I can zoom from 70 to 200, and this would be a good lens to get portrait kind of things, because remember, portrait, the face looks best at 70, 80 millimeter. Again, it just depends on the artist who's shooting that. But with a 200, I can really zoom in on something as well and get a nice image if it's farther away from me. It's heavy, obviously, because there's a lot of glass there. They also have these things called prime lenses. You won't have to worry about those. They're very expensive, but they're very clean, and they work really great in low light as well. And you don't have as much aberration as you go through, like this one going from a 70 to 200. That lens is not going to recreate as well as a prime. Now, prime lenses you can get, I was looking on online today, I can't remember the company, but there was a kit of like 10 or 11, 12 lenses. It was almost $500,000. So, I mean, if you're Disney or Netflix, well, some people on Netflix are getting away with a lot less expensive than that, but you can spend a ton of money on this. Although you can spend relatively little bit of money also and create great motion pictures or great movies, great documentaries. It all starts with a story and how you present it. So, questions, I think.
I have a microphone here.
What happens with a wide-angle lens and lighting versus a telephoto lens and lighting for your subject? How is light impacted?
The longer the lens, the more light it's going to take. Okay? So if I have the same camera here and I'm all the way out, zoomed all the way out, and I've got a nice looking shot and it's properly illuminated. Lovely. When I push in, it's going to take, because you're shooting through more glass, if you will, it's going to take more light to illuminate that. So you might have to open up your iris. And now some lenses, though, as you zoom in on them, the image will darken because it won't give you, each lens is created with a certain amount of light gathering ability. And it might be like a 1.8 is the widest that lens will open up. And so a 1.8 is a very, very fast lens. It makes a big opening, a big aperture. Others, but they're much more expensive. Others might be a 2.8, and that lens, that aperture, that opening isn't as large. So it's not as fast a lens as they call it. It won't gather as much light. And some zoom lenses, though, will start at like a 2.8, but when you zoom in, because it takes more light, the lens wasn't created to continue to have that same amount of light go in. It will fall off to like a 3.2, something like that, and so it'll get darker. So then you have to open up your iris or do something else to get more light.
Can you just show an example of open an iris and close an iris on
sure.
that camera?
So here's my iris. Obviously that's closed, and you see on the bottom there it's an f16, f15, f14, f11, f10, f9, f8, f7, so there's my different stops. Okay.
And he's out of focus, just to let you know.
I know.
But really, he
And
would be in focus.
You can hand over to me if you want.
Yeah, go over to.
But watch what
lighting.
happens. Watch what happens. This is another thing that happens as I close my lens. What happens to her? She starts to come into focus. Okay? So that's another thing. If you want to get something out of focus in front or behind, you shoot wide open. Because if I'm not in focus, it's going to show me that. But it's also going to take those things that are in front or behind, and it will have this ability to drop off in the background. Okay?
We'll have you sign a waiver later.
Yeah.
Can you talk about
Okay.
white balancing with these cameras and what's not?
Sure. We don't realize it. I mean, it's like God gave us this ability to, we see light, and we don't really continually monitor what the color temperature of a certain light source is. But cameras aren't like that. They're pretty dumb in a sense that every source of light has a color temperature to it. It's called Kelvin because Sir Kelvin, I don't know if it was in the 1800s or when he was doing these tests, he heated up a piece of metal, and the hotter it got, the color changed. Okay, so a candle is a very low color temperature, 2,800 degrees Kelvin. The sun is at like, on a normal day, if you go outside and do a white balance, it's 5,600 degrees Kelvin. Well, the camera doesn't know that. So the higher the number, the more blue the color temperature of that light is. Like these are probably 3,200, right?
I think a white balanced at 2,900. I think 2,990 right there.
Oh, okay. So what you have to do is tell the camera the light source that you're using, and then the camera will go, oh, okay, it'll mix the RG and B, the red, green, and blue to make white. So he came in and it was really blue because it was, or was it, yeah, it was probably really, it seemed like it was really blue when I first saw it. Anyway, you'll tell the camera, you'll put a piece of white card in front of it and say, this is the color temperature of the light that I'm working with, okay? Now, better, if you blow your white balance, you can fix it in post. But if you blow your focus, you can't fix that in post, you know. So if anything, I want my shot in focus. If the person wasn't quite correct on the white balance, I can go in there and I can adjust that with the software on Premiere Pro. Okay.
Most standard feature, if you're shooting just like a lecture like this, you would set up a camera in one spot, go into the subject, focus on his eyes. If they're not moving much, frame up your shot. And then also before that, you would do a white balance of the room, and then get your focus, frame up your shot, and start rolling. And that's if the subject stayed still on for a lecture.
And that's critical to get this critical focus. Go right in on the eyes. If I were closer, and so I would you go to the end of the focal length. You zoom all the way in, get your focus, and then as I zoom out, that person stays in focus. And my depth of field on a wide angle, everyone looks like they're pretty much in focus, right? Because what I've created is this depth of field that's huge on a wide angle lens. I've come out, all right? So well, that looks pretty much in focus. But now watch what happens though if I zoom to someone else on a different focal plane. I'm not in focus, okay? So if I decide I'm gonna get a shot of somebody else, I've got to come in there and get focus again. But when I zoom out, because it's a wide angle, that gives me a wide depth of field, and it looks like everybody's in focus. And at that focal length, they pretty much are. Okay. Anything else?
And most of these cameras have autofocus. If you're not a professional, just a amateur, I would recommend putting it in autofocus and let it do its thing. But if you want to learn, then you put it in manual and start shooting everything manual. You'll do your iris manually, your zoom in and out manually, your focus manually.
Yeah, if you're thrown into something and you haven't had a lot of experience, you can rely on that. Nowadays, cameras they're really hyping their ability to autofocus. Just learn how to use that autofocus. The problem with autofocus sometimes, though, is if you've got somebody in the shot and then somebody else comes into the shot behind, if I'm shooting him and all of a sudden somebody else comes into the shot and it's on autofocus, it might grab the other person and start focusing. See, now it's hunting and pecking. Okay, who do you want me to put in focus here? It only knows so much. Same thing with auto iris. If I'm in auto iris and the lighting is fine, and all of a sudden somebody steps behind or opens that door, opens the door or something like that, then and a light, it gets brighter, all of a sudden the iris, the computer inside the camera is going, whoa, that's too much bright, so it's going to close down. And then the door closes and it's going to bloom, it's going to go back up and down, up and down, up and down. So that's why when I teach my students, I say, use manual always until you get into those situations where you can get away with it and know that you don't have to worry about it. It's a good thing to come, to have in your back pocket to say, oh, I can just hit my autofocus and there I am. If I'm worried about whether I'm in focus or not, because sometimes, especially at a live event, it's like, geez, I don't know if I went and got focused on this, and they're on me. It's like, well, the minute they get off, I can either zoom in and get my focus, and I'm too lazy because I had this locked down, get my focus and come back, or I can go over here and go, oh, push autofocus. And then I get my autofocus that way. I'm in focus, so it's not going to do anything. Okay. And as I said earlier, the camera is it's a tool for you to tell a story. You go to motion pictures or you watch whatever you watch. If it's a great story, you'll watch it. And if it's a great director, obviously will help to make that. If it's a horrible story, no one goes to see him, and the technical quality could be really pretty good. But as far as I'm concerned, it all starts with the idea that you have. But then knowing the different things that the camera gives you, whether it's your focal length, your angle of the shot, where you put the camera, all those things working together, and it can seem like a lot when you first get started, but the more you do it, the more you'll go, oh, okay, I know where I want to shoot this from. I know where my focal length. I want to zoom it in about here. I want a 2-shot, whatever. I want an over the shoulder. I want a long shot. Whatever those shots are, then I'm going to start to build and put together. Okay? And then the other thing I tell my students is, look, when you shoot your wide shot and you're giving me a medium shot, don't just zoom in. Pretend like that zoom isn't there for a while. Okay? I want you, even if you zoom in, but I want you to move the camera 35 degrees to one side or the other, so it makes it more interesting for the viewer. To go from this to that, that's just lazy, you know? All right. I think I'll leave it at that.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yeah.
I don't know if you ever watched the show The Office.
Oh, yeah.
They would start with the close.
Yeah, they start with the close. I mean, it seems like that's what they're doing. They're close up and then they pull back or something like that. And I think that's probably their style, you know, part of it. But what do you think of that format?
You know, everybody has their techniques, and I'm more of a truist. So I've seen that. To me, there comes to a point where almost, if you're not careful, the camera becomes another person in the room or another actor in the scene, and it almost points itself out. And who am I to say? You know, The Office. It's a huge hit. So what they did, people loved it and they went with it. It's not my cup of tea, but I understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. But I tend to use my camera that it's in the background. It's not, you know, the obvious thing that's going on.
Another question.
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay. For field work, when you're out in the field shooting with some of these cameras or other cameras, how much recording time are you getting to a chip or?
It depends on the size of the card,
Yeah.
but you know they're probably 128s or 64 gig or 128 gig, and if you're shooting 1920 by 1080, you might get a couple hours.
400 minutes about.
Yeah. And it all depends
We
also.
have the 126.
You get it more than you need. You know, I just did a project, and we shot interviews. I shot in 4K so I could punch in if I wanted to go from a medium to a close-up if the person started talking and was overwhelmed with some emotion. I'm all about that, but they're very large files.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you're doing an interview, go in with your questions all set. Don't go in with 20 questions. Go in with 5 or 6 or 7 questions, and you can always follow up on a question. My wife, who is a news reporter, used to be a news. She is so good at this. She didn't join me on this last project, so I had these interviews. I was helped by some people. The interviews were like 20, 30-minute interviews. The whole piece is 10 minutes. It's just too much. So go in with the questions that you want to learn about, that you know you get a fairly good idea what the response is going to be, and you'll be fine, you know. So that's important to know. Don't have a ton of stuff that's you're never going to use. It just takes up too much time and wastes your time.
Yes, I'd say about an hour and a half to an hour 45 if you shoot 4K, and almost 400 minutes, whatever that accumulates to for standard or high definition, 1920 by 1080.
On our C70, we were shooting with 128 gigabyte cards, and when you're in 4K, I feel like we got just over 2 hours. So it's probably like a minute per gigabyte, roughly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Ton. And up here, you'll notice up on the right-hand side, it says YCC 420 8-bit. That is telling you the type of compression that the camera is using, because you can shoot raw, and it will give you all the information in that scene from every pixel on that sensor. This is not. It's cheating in it because the eye is easy to fool when it comes to color in an image, not so much with the light, because the eye sees the difference in illuminance between every frame. But that 420, that 0 means information on 4 of those pixels is just redundant. So it's just throwing out a bunch of information, which is great because the eye doesn't notice it, but it makes the files a lot smaller.
And that's, Phil's next class of section, what is it, 400, if you want to learn that.
Yeah,
You know, this is just the basic. If you
yeah.
want the advanced portion, come back another day.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate being able to be here with you guys. Thanks.